Hello, everybody. Hi, Oswald. Welcome to... Why, thank you. I haven't even said anything yet. Welcome to the final panel discussion of the Xynteo Exchange Square. I just want to take you guys back again to this morning when you were in your studios. You were coming up with business ideas that had the potential for some sort of positive impact. I'd just love to get a sense from you on how many of you found that easy? Like, do you think you and your team cracked it? Can you raise your hands? Few people. Pretty pessimistic crowd. But the reality is, it is hard. It's hard to build a business that not just delivers financial returns, but also delivers social returns. But the good news is it's also possible. You had the opportunity yesterday to meet some of these businesses in the marketplace, and I'm delighted to invite today to the stage two incredible teams who've not only made it happen, but have made a huge success out of it. So I'd first like to invite Social Isolation. Karen, the founder of Social Isolation, come on up here. Social Isolation, thank you. Social Isolation is responsible for this little guy here. Karen and her team develop tools to improve social isolation and end loneliness for young children and the elderly. I'd also like to invite Anniken onto stage. Anniken is an angel investor in Social Isolation, and Heidi. Heidi is the director of IKT Norway, who's also been helping Social Isolation on their journey. I also have the team from Runa. I'd love to invite Tyler. Tyler is the founder of Runa. It's an Amazonian beverages company. Eliot, the executive director of the Runa Foundation, and Courtney, who is also runs a VC but is the angel investor in Runa. Come on over. Rick, I'm like 2 steps further to being like Whoopi Goldberg than you, so I'm going to take my seat here. So the way in which we're going to do this is that these two teams are here to help you guys understand sort of how it works, what it takes to really go from just an idea to making it a reality and a commercially successful one. So I'm just going to hear each of your stories first, or we are, rather, and then we're going to let you guys loose to have a conversation with each other. Sound good? Okay, let me start with you. Tyler, founder of Runa, you had this idea at some point to take a beverage, a tea drink, that was sort of from an Amazonian tribe, and take it all the way to the US and sell it in Whole Foods. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
For sure, it's definitely a circuitous one, no question about it. I found myself in the Peruvian Amazon in college studying indigenous languages. Journey I never expected to be on growing up in the suburbs in California, and was drawn to the richness of the Amazonian cultures. Something about studying the language specifically was very instructive about their fundamental relationship to the natural world that was radically different from where I'd grown up. And this close identification with their stories and the trees and the animals was deeply inspirational. Yet I'd frequently wake up and hear the sound of chainsaws cutting down hardwood trees. And vividly remember one morning trying to confront one of the men in the village with my, Berkeley, California environmental, righteousness, and said, "Hey, man, you just told me a story about how your grandfather's spirit lived in the very tree you just cut down, yet you're getting ready to sell it for pennies on the dollar." And he looked at me and said, "Well, if you had a choice between having enough money to send your child to school or cutting down a tree, what would your choice be? Or if it was sending your mom to the hospital because she broke her leg or cutting down the tree, what kind of choice would you make?" Which as a 19-year-old punched me in the gut pretty hard, and it made me reevaluate this very fundamental structural reality that these communities face, where they're inextricably linked to the global world. They want to carry forward parts of their traditions, yet they don't have the means to. And the fundamental economic opportunities are heavily destructive to their environment or often pull them away from their communities. So wandered back to university, and in my last semester at school wrote a business plan to commercialize this one special leaf from the Ecuadorian Amazon. It's a leaf called guayusa, a bit of a strange name, but a very caffeinated leaf, a leaf that had never ever been commercially produced. We saw an opportunity to a very vague, pretty bad college business plan idea of creating some sort of beverages from this leaf, recognizing the caffeine content, but most importantly, recognizing that if we could, for some crazy reason, make this business work, we could use the production to benefit communities in the Amazon. So 2 days after graduating from college, moved to the middle of the Ecuadorian Amazon to try and give this a go. And when we first sat down with these communities and told them that we wanted to pay cash, dollars, to buy these leaves and put them in drinks and sell them in New York City, we would just get these completely blank stares and then just cackling, like rounds of hysterical laughter from the communities, because it was such a foreign idea. You know, their basic experience with the outside world has been one of being dismissed, of being told for 500 years your traditions mean nothing, your knowledge of the rainforest means nothing, and therefore, you know, the only value you have is to come forward and leave behind your past for the future. And what we were saying was, we actually think there's a more profitable future for your people and your resources in the very heart of those resources. And this leaf specifically, it's their emblem of identity. It's the plant that they most revere. The communities get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, they sit around the fire and drink this tea together. And it's this core ritual that unites their families and their relationship to the rainforest. So we were trying to say, let's use that as the way to support your communities in the most real sense through dollars, through sustainable production. And in getting things going, there were two strategies we took, being faced with obviously a lot of uncertainty and really building this entire supply chain from scratch. First was that we were quite aware that we were not business people. You know, my degree is in literary arts, which, you know, weren't a lot of economics courses in my literary arts training. But we wanted to actually lean into that background, recognizing that what we knew how to do was ask questions. And that can often be seen as a weakness, but we found a strength in it, of using the student attitude to network, to resource, to learn, and to build this education as a touch point. The second was that we built a board of advisors. And in a similar way, we saw it as a council of elders, as might be parallel in indigenous communities, to guide us. You know, we were young and 22 and very hungry, yet we honored that support we could get from people who had walked the path before us. So, you know, a long journey we can talk about from there, but the company, we support 3,000 farming families in Ecuador, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of income. We have a hybrid organization, which we can talk about, half for-profit, half nonprofit. It's been quite a ride.
Sounds like it, definitely. But I'd love to pick up on that point that you ended with, which is that you are a hybrid organization. So, you know, you've come this long journey. Today you're a multi-million-dollar business, and you have a very interesting entity structure. And I know, Eliot, you are responsible for the Runa Foundation. But for the layperson like me, help me understand why you chose to have a foundation and a business. Like, what's going on there? Why did you do it that way?
Sure. Well, I think in their core, there's a huge difference between how a nonprofit and a for-profit, how they structurally work, and really what their mission is. And as much as social businesses would like to have a social impact, the core of a for-profit business is to make profit. The core of a nonprofit, you know, at least in the U.S. and most countries, is that there is no profit accumulation, that really everything has to be reinvested for some sort of social or environmental good. And so sort of structurally, we always felt that, yes, we should have a company, because that company can really be the driver, and for these families that Tyler was talking about, that's what gives them an income, that's what gives them a livelihood through business. But at the same time, and especially if you look at the history of the Amazon, the history of exploitation that's happened in the Amazon, a for-profit business on its own does not necessarily ensure that those people's lives will be better. In fact, in many cases, it historically has been the opposite. So for us, a nonprofit, the idea there was that we could really create the sort of the rules of the game of how this market would work, that we could tap into different funding sources. We could create new partnerships, public partnerships, and private partnerships, to really create the rules of that game. So that was sort of where we idealistically started from. I think we also started from a place of starting a startup and trying to raise as much money as we could from different sources. And at the beginning, a nonprofit gave us a lot of other ability to raise funds outside of traditional investment. We got funds from private foundations like the MacArthur Foundation in the U.S. We also have funds from governments, not from the government of Norway, but the Finnish government.
Maybe yes. Yeah.
But the Finnish government was a huge supporter of us, and the Belgian government. All of those funds went directly to our nonprofit in Ecuador, with really the goal of doing research. We were taking a plant that had never been commercialized, as Tyler said, but we had this vision. I grew up as a kid. My sort of dream was to always save the rainforest, and I just kind of like Tyler said, that core problem of how a person makes a decision to cut a tree or not to cut the tree. How do you attack that? How do you get to that? And we did it through this hybrid vision of doing research on plants, of understanding how to manage the forest, and how we could really create the system. So, like I said, I think when we first started, we didn't really know exactly what we were doing. We had this vision that, like, okay, a nonprofit, that makes sense idealistically. Really, it was also opportunistic to raise those funds. We've learned a lot in this adventure, and I think we're going to continue to refine how we work. But it really is a beautiful option to be able to work in those both worlds.
That sounds like it. My dream was also to try and save the rainforest, so I wish we'd met many years earlier. We would have achieved it by now. Courtney, you were an early investor. Investor or grant maker? Which one? Investor.
Yeah.
In Runa. I'd love to hear your story and understand at what stage you got involved with these guys, why got involved, sorry, why you decided to put your money behind them, and tell me the story.
Yeah. So I actually went to college with Tyler and the other co-founder of Runa, which is both a blessing. We were in the dorm room talking about, it was the first social entrepreneurship class that our university ever offered. And I was in the unique position of being the student elected to advise the board of trustees of our university on corporate responsibility and investing, and was in an active role of coming up against every excuse of fiduciary responsibility and making the case for green business. And so when I had these friends who were super excited about this project and they needed $500, $1,000, $1,500, I was like, we can do it. And that a little bit of what Tyler was talking about of starting a company from the perspective of a student and from the perspective of asking questions, that was the same way I got into the role of studying finance and social change, and actually took a break from university to go undercover and do a lot of the original research on the Koch brothers and the role of conservative philanthropy. And so I came back to school really with a eagerness to find the holes and find the opportunities, and that's what led me into consistently investing in Runa through all the different rounds, and also taught me about the differences between investing as an individual and being a good ally to you guys, and being able to move capital quickly where other places aren't, and then moving into the role of working with private families and institutions, and then finding the barriers of those institutions and investing directly in companies. And that's how I found my niche and continue to work with companies like Runa and help them scale.
Super, thank you for sharing that. So I'm now going to turn over to social isolation. You guys have been waiting patiently in this corner. Karen, you and Tyler, I'm sure, are going to have a good conversation after this panel. Yeah. You've gone through a similar but yet very different journey to reach your aha moment when you started social isolation, when you decided this was the idea that you wanted to put your years and your effort and your time and your blood, sweat, and tears behind. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, I have to do this. It's no isolation.
What have you been calling it? So isolation?
And the name should kind of say it all.
Yeah.
We're fighting against social isolation and loneliness, yeah. And I think everyone here, everyone in the world has at some point experienced loneliness. And if you haven't yet, then you're very lucky, and it's probably in the cards in the future as well. So we were 3 founders back 3 years ago, and we had certainly all felt that loneliness feeling, and we all come from tech, and we were all very sure that the technology that we saw out there today is all focused on making efficient people more efficient. It's all focused on being cool, on seeing what technology can do. Like, actually, instead of solving problems. And we thought that we could attack that from a whole other angle. And it was a friend of mine mentioning that she had been working as a nurse at a children's ward, and she was just mentioning these kids that were staying there long term in the hospital in a bypassing to me, and I couldn't really get my head around why these kids, like, they are using all sorts of technology. The iPads are made for them. They have phones, they have computers, they have everything. Why would it be a hinder to them to be laying in bed? Like, they should be able to be out there. And my co-founders and I started looking into that and very quickly realized that the technology that these kids are being offered are there to send messages when you have something to say. They're there to share content when you've done something. They're there to read what everyone else have done. But what they really needed was just to participate. They weren't participating in anything. They weren't doing anything. They were just lying there and watching the world go past. And that was so fundamentally sad to us that we quit everything that we were doing and said, okay, we can make something for these kids. We have no idea what they need, but we can certainly figure it out. And it ended up being this telepresence robot. It's called AV1. So you can pick it up actually and send it around. It's supposed to be picked up and carried around by the friends of the child. So it streams everything from a camera on it.
Is someone watching us? Right
no one's watching us through this one. This is in demo mode, so it's only standing there and being pretty. But normally there would be a kid in bed somewhere, either at the hospital or at home, seeing what the robot sees and hearing what the robot hears and being able to talk back through the robot. And there's currently 807 of these out there in 13 countries today, with 807 kids behind them, and they have every diagnosis you can imagine, from cancer to chronic fatigue, but all of them have in common that they're forced to stay away from their everyday life, and they use AV1 as an extension of themselves. It's our first product. We made one more now, have the plan to make several others, because we're no isolation, and it's all about like targeting all the groups that are suffering from social isolation and loneliness. And the kids was where it all kind of started for us, and then the seniors became a very natural second. They're the group that are definitely suffering the most, and where we're seeing that communication technology especially has really failed the senior demographic. We're making, the technology industry has been making things for millennials and then adapting them slightly and giving them to the seniors and saying that, okay, this is easy for me, this should be easy for you, but that's not necessarily the case. And we wanted to really be a game changer there and see if we could build something from the seniors' perspective instead of adapting something that we've made for ourselves.
That's wonderful, and it's great to hear that someone is looking out for those neglected populations who no other tech entrepreneurs are building for and innovating for. So, Anniken, you own a co-working space called 657, and you hosted Karen and her team, and you're also an angel investor. So, do you always just move in with someone and then you do the deal, or how does that work for you? Tell me about why you invested in.
Well, that is actually also a good strategy, but that's not what we do normally.
Okay.
So our co-working space is a creative co-working space. We have approximately 230 people, and all of them work creatively somehow. And so I met Karen before she moved into our space, and you were located in 3 different spaces at the time, which was really smart. You were located in a hacker space, in a tech space, and in an accelerator.
And it was a nightmare.
Well, it was probably smart up until that point.
Yeah.
And so my daytime work is being a branding consultant. So I've been working with branding and design for 25 years. So this co-working space we have is actually a community that we've been building for people like us. So what we find is that especially tech companies that incubate somewhere, when they go to market, they like to sit in a place like ours. not only because they want to move away from home, from the incubator, but they're not ready to buy a house yet or move completely by themselves, but also because our expertise as branding people and communicators is something very different than what they know how to do. So these tech-savvy people and young people moved into our offices some years ago, and I heard about No Isolation through my network. So the reason why I invested is because I fell in love with their vision. So here you have a company with a vision, which is no isolation. That's literally their sentence, their vision statement. The name is the same. It's No Isolation. And they're not only making products, they're building a company that's solving that problem. So as a branding person, I could really see that good story being put to life. And also, when you moved in with us, we got the first-hand experience of how the team worked. And as an investor, you always want to take a very good look at the team. And we really believed in this team. And so another factor that made me even more sure that this was a good idea is because Karen and her team got on board investors that I highly respect and admire. And one of the investors took the role as lead investor. And he also went in for a period of time as your chairman. I think he took a really big chunk of responsibility at that point for the company and for the people, because you were young. And for us, collaborating as owners was also a journey for us. You know, it's you jump in the boat together with the team that you don't know from before, and you put your money in their wallet, and you want to be invested also as a person. So my value system corresponds with their value system, which is basically the, for me, ultimate reason to invest. So yeah, I guess that's the basic parts of it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, Heidi, moving over to you. You actually operate at a different sort of more meta level across the board. So Heidi represents IKT Norway, and you are an interest group for companies, big and small, on the digital front, basically digital companies. So how did you get involved with No Isolation, and can you give us a little bit of a picture of like how you work with startups and why do they need your help exactly?
Yeah, IKT Norge, or Austlid Norway, is an organization for 450 tech companies in Norway, both the big global companies and also the startup companies. And our role is to give all our members some new market opportunities, and we do that in different kind of ways. We work plenty much with the government level, the politicals, both for giving them competence of digital solutions, digital politics, and how to make a kind of a new Norway. And we also bring the startups together with the big companies to give them some new network, put them on stage, put them in different kind of boards, and doing that things. And I remember when I first met Karen and her team, it was 3 years ago, I think. Almost. I had this job for only some weeks as the CEO of the Austlid Norway, and I remember that I saw two things. It was a company with tech with meaning. It was kind of a new way to build business in Norway. And I also saw a company that really took the user perspective. And for the last 3 years, we have seen some more companies like you that give technology a deeper meaning because it solves big problems for us. And that's really, really important.
I wonder if I can actually, now the floor is open. so anyone can jump in at this point. But I'd love to direct a question back at you, Anniken. You have a front row seat to seeing lots of different startups, as do you, actually. Is there an increasing trend in startups and businesses with social and environmental mission at the center?
Absolutely, and it almost doesn't give meaning any longer to segregate between those who do and those who don't. So anyone below 30 years old today will not understand the question. And most people in our office is below 30 years old. And so I guess we need the term a little bit longer because some of us are over 30, but it's beyond the trend. You know, it's a shift. It's happening. Yeah.
Do you guys find that as well when you go to an investor, especially at this stage? You're pretty mature now as a company. Are they willing to see you in the same light as they see a company that is, driven purely by financial return?
I mean, we've had every different possible type investor. We've had nonprofit foundations who've invested other foundation dollars. We've had big beverage industry executives who could care less that we help farmers and purely see it as a great beverage company. So I think there's two things that come from me. I mean, one, in a bit of a contrast to your perspective, at least in the US, I think there's a big risk in our generation that when we have companies, I mean, I like to kind of throw Facebook under the bus as an example of this, but when we have big tech companies who are all saying they're on a mission and that they're mission driven, I think it radically skews the conversation because it's so easy to frame lofty ideals in a certain way when, if you look at the actual operating principle, for me, of a company like Facebook, they're selling advertisements and extracting attention from local communities. Personal perspective. Whereas I think the social businesses that are existing, like the way we're trying to operate, is there's impact built into the core business operation. The way we make money is the same way that we create impact. We have to buy leaves from farmers, we sell products. It's inextricable. And it's very extricable from cause marketing. We sell products because we have a great tasting product that gives you great energy. And a lot of people who drink our products have no idea that it's coming from farming families. So I think a lot of these pieces need to be extracted, and I think there's actually a big risk right now in diluting real social impact orientation inside of organizations with broader conversations about mission and purpose.
That's so interesting. That's basically the concept of having a mission has almost been co-opted by companies, which you would say maybe don't have the same type of mission or don't have the same mission.
And I think our language is just a bit blurred.
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, it gets to this question that I have in my mind right now around you're still competing with these companies for talent, for resources, etc. I'm particularly interested in diving into this talent question because at Xynteo we like to say there's three sort of pillars or three building blocks to new business models. There's ideas, there's talent, and there's capital. And if you can match those, connect those together, you can create new growth. But you are competing for talent against the Facebooks, etc. of the world. So how do you do that? And what sorts of people do you attract?
Cool. Well, we were actually talking about this morning. That I think one way to compete, and one thing that we've definitely done is to sell the story of what we're doing, the mission behind what we're doing, as part of what people want to get involved in and what they want to spend their, especially young people, like their 20s, they want to spend it doing something meaningful. They want to spend it, or not everybody, but a bunch of people do. And so I think, obviously, like as a startup, we definitely don't pay as much as some bigger company, but there's a lot of people who are really looking for that connection to a mission. At the same time, we were talking about that's dangerous. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to help elucidate the answer here, but one of the problems that creates is that people are into it for this bigger mission, and so sometimes they don't. And maybe they are making less money, so they feel that they have more ownership over decision making when maybe they don't. Maybe they step out of bounds and say, well, no, this is our goal, is we're saving this, we're going to do this. And so it can be confusing for people that really it is a business, it is a startup, and yes, we do have this mission, but we also, you need to wake up and get to work. So I think on the one hand, you can compete by selling that, but you also have to be careful and realistic in communicating with your team that we have a job to do, and you're not going to like everything that you're doing. We're not here saving the rainforest every day. Like, you're going to spend a lot of time on your computer.
Only half the days. Go ahead.
On that, one thing that was definitely very different about Runa versus the hundreds of impact companies I've visited and been a part of is that the impact with Runa is palpable at every single scale and every single level. And going to Ecuador, whether we're working in Brooklyn, Providence, the West Coast, or Ecuador, every single person in the supply chain is bought into the mission, and every single person is on the ground working at whatever level. And it's one of the dangers that you were talking about with this generation is we don't know the difference between everyone on the ground working cooperatively, organizing farmers versus buying a T-shirt that's horrible for the environment, and 1% goes back to something that we don't even know. That purchasing choice for a lot of young consumers is very easy to say that 1%, that 10% will buy it is equal to what we're doing here. But I think with Talon and Runa, people are really hungry, whether that's in Ecuador, whether that's here, and that work ethic is contagious.
It's very much at the core of your business, right? The mission, whereas in this 1% case, it's very much not. I'm curious to just turn that final question over to you guys. Like, have you faced any difficult trade-offs that, once this crowd goes off and starts to develop their ideas that they came up with this morning, are there any tips you'd give them on how to deal with that tension between financial and social?
Well, yes. I think the first thing that I have to say is that impact can be and is anything and everything, right? What are you impacting and so on, and how do you measure it? But there's definitely money in real impact. For us, we're seeing that we're able to sell robots because we can save the local government money down the road because these kids don't drop out of school. Kids dropping out of school is extremely expensive, both for the individual and for the government. And I think that's solid, very measurable impact. That's money you can count home. So find the nerve in your impact where there's actual money. Same with the seniors that we're working with now. And then when it comes to like how we've had to leverage our social versus business side, I think it's one and the same thing. The only thing I've concretely experienced like over the last 3 years is that I have to explain to people who thinks that we are impact driven and so soft and so kind that we cannot make money, and then you have to explain that no we're just as much a business as anyone else. We're just based on these principles, and that's where we're coming from, and we're never going to change that, and I'm never going to make money throwing those principles under the bus, but I don't think I ever have to. Like, I think we'll make more money because we're taking those principles with us, and yeah.
Completely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a very sort of insightful point to end on, which is just really, it's not about financial versus social necessarily. Everything has a return on it, and it's really what you value that counts, and maybe over what time frame as well. And with that, I'd love to invite the audience to give these two teams a round of applause for having such an impact on so many people's lives. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for showing us the art of the possible.